I was sipping my coffee on the porch when I heard the low, sinister whirring. My wife shrieked from inside, then stormed out in her bathrobe, pointing at the bedroom window. A drone had been hovering outside it, less than 3 feet from the glass, tilting as if it were peeking in. I dropped my mug and sprinted inside, but by the time I reached the front yard, the thing zipped off like it knew I was coming. I stood there, barefoot in the gravel, trying to process the sheer audacity of what just happened. This wasn't a kid playing around. This was surveillance. And I already had a good idea whose hands were behind the remote. Our farm sat just on the border of the HOA's reach, not officially under their authority, but close enough for Karen, our self-declared neighborhood enforcer, to stick her nose where it didn't belong. She'd always had a problem with how we ran wild out here. She didn't like the sounds of our roosters in the morning. She didn't like that we parked our tractor in the open. And she really didn't like that my wife sunbathed in the backyard wearing whatever she pleased, or sometimes nothing at all. But instead of talking like a normal person, she chose espionage. At first, I'd seen glimpses of the drone here and there. Once above the cornfield, once near the barn. I figured it belonged to one of the teenagers down the road. But after today's peeping stunt, I got serious. I grabbed the binoculars and climbed the water tower, scanning the area to see where the little bugger had flown off to. And sure enough, it sailed straight down Maple Lane and landed gently in the manicured backyard of Karen's 2-story colonial, the one with the unnecessary Greek columns and a HOA proud sign in the garden bed. She was waiting there with her arms crossed like a general debriefing a returning soldier. I marched over within the hour. No yelling, no accusations, just a calm knock on the door. She opened it like she'd been expecting me. Her smile was plastic, her tones syrupy sweet. "Can I help you?" she asked, standing just a little too far in the doorway to let me see inside. I told her exactly what I'd seen. That the drone was hovering at eye level with my bedroom window. That it's not the first time it's been on my property. That it needs to stop. She didn't deny it. Not even a little. Instead, she tilted her head and said, "Well, if everything you're doing is legal, why would you be so worried about a drone? It's not like I'm recording anything inappropriate." That sentence alone told me she absolutely was recording something inappropriate. I took a deep breath and said I wouldn't press charges yet, but if it happened again, I'd consider my options. Her smirk widened. "Suit yourself," she chirped, and shut the door before I could say another word. That night, I walked into my barn, looked up at the old wooden rafter near the roof, and gave a low whistle. A large shadow stirred. My bald eagle, Liberty, slowly turned her head and blinked down at me with those sharp, intelligent eyes. She'd been with me since I rescued her from a roadside trap 5 years ago. I had all the licenses, all the permit. I'd trained her using falconry techniques passed down from my grandfather. She was smart, loyal, and strong, and thanks to a little accident involving a hawk and a shiny weather vane, she had a vendetta against flying objects. I told her we had a job coming. A real one. The next morning, I set up a trail cam and waited. Sure enough, 7:12 a.m. sharp, the drone returned. It zipped in from the same direction, hovered over the same parts of the yard, even dipped low to check out the chicken coop. It did a wide sweep of the tractor, circled the greenhouse, then made its way toward the house. This time I was ready. I stepped out, rake in hand, and took a swing. The drone bobbed and weaved, just out of reach, before shooting upward and darting back the way it came like it was laughing at me. Liberty let out a short, sharp cry from the barn rafters. I checked the trail cam footage. The drone had come closer this time. Much closer. It had focused on my wife's window again, and the greenhouse. What was it looking for? My crop rotation plan? My irrigation layout? Or just a thrill? Later that afternoon, I followed the same path it had taken, keeping to the shadows, cutting through trees, until I saw it land once again on Karen's patio. But this time she wasn't alone. 3 other HOA members were with her, gathered around a tablet, watching the live feed. They were laughing. That told me two things. One, this wasn't just Karen being nosy. It was coordinated. And two, they had no idea what was about to come for them. I didn't go back to their house. I didn't make another warning. Instead, I set up a plan. First, I reinforced Liberty's training, added motion triggers to the yard perimeter, fed her fresh trout, gave her sky drills in open field. She was still as sharp as ever. Then I made sure she'd recognize the sound of that drone. I replayed the footage, let her watch its path. Liberty's head followed the screen. She clicked her beak. That was all I needed. By the time night fell, I had rigged the porch lights to a motion sensor set to blink red when the drone re-entered the airspace. Liberty was perched silently in the dark of the silo, her wings tucked, her eyes locked on the open sky. This time, when Karen sent her mechanical spy over my barn, it wouldn't be coming back in one piece. The next morning started off strangely quiet. No drone, no buzzing, no drama. It felt almost like the calm before a storm, and I didn't trust it for a second. I was tossing feed to the chickens when I heard the crunch of tires on gravel. I looked up to see 3 cars pulling into my driveway, one of which had the HOA logo plastered on the side. Out stepped Karen, of course, wearing a sun hat large enough to shade a patio set and flanked by 2 board members. Jim, the guy who once tried to fine a neighbor for having decorative garden gnomes, and Linda, who had an allergic reaction to a whiff of compost last fall and petitioned to ban organic odors. All 3 were holding clipboards like they were entering a crime scene. Karen wasted no time. "We're conducting a community safety inspection," she announced, ignoring my confused look and marching straight toward the barn. I stepped in front of her. "Hold up," I said. "This is my property. You've got no HOA authority out here." Jim chimed in, looking smug. "Your property lies within the HOA's shared visual influence zone. That gives us the right to ensure you're not contributing to community disturbances." I blinked. Visual influence zone? Karen nodded like it made perfect sense. "If we can see it, we can regulate it. And several members have complained about a large predatory bird intimidating them during walks." I glanced up. Liberty was perched high on the silo, preening her feathers like a diva who knew she was being watched. Karen pointed her clipboard toward the barn, demanding to inspect the aerial hazard they'd heard about. I told them again they had no jurisdiction, but Jim whipped out a flimsy printout of what looked like a self-made ordinance with the HOA seal crudely photoshopped in the corner. It was laughable. Still, I let them peek, mainly because I had nothing to hide and everything to prove. They stepped into the barn cautiously, as if expecting to find a military drone lab or a cage full of bats. What they got instead was Liberty, perched calmly with one leg tucked in, and a few goats munching hay in the back. I even offered them some fresh eggs just to watch them squirm. Linda refused to breathe the air and wrapped a scarf around her face. They left looking confused but unsatisfied, like they'd expected a Bond villain's lair and instead got Old MacDonald's shed. As they drove off, Karen gave one last glance back, her eyes darting toward the silo where Liberty still stood proudly. She wasn't done. I could feel it. Later that night, as I locked the chicken coop and checked the perimeter lights, I saw the drone return. But it didn't approach directly this time. It zigzagged around the edges of the property, avoiding the trail cam zones like it knew where they were. That confirmed it. They'd studied my layout. Maybe even during their fake inspection. I slipped inside the barn, gave a single low whistle, and Liberty immediately perked up. She knew it was go time. I turned off the floodlights, kept the barn doors cracked just enough for Liberty to have a clean launch path, and waited. The drone crept in slowly now, silent but glowing faintly with red lights. It hovered low, closer than before, maybe emboldened by the lack of visible resistance. I hit the trigger. The red perimeter lights flashed twice. In one fluid motion, Liberty leapt from her perch and vanished into the dark. It was silent for maybe 4 seconds. Then a sharp fluttering gust and a sudden clank of metal hitting wood echoed through the yard. I stepped outside and found the drone's right rotor twitching on the ground. A foot away sat Liberty, completely still, the rest of the drone trapped beneath one powerful claw. She looked at me like she was waiting for the next command. I scooped up the wreckage and brought it into the workshop. Inside, I disassembled the drone on my workbench. It wasn't your average off-the-shelf drone. This one had a miniature hard drive, a high-def camera, and a tiny mic embedded into the frame. And when I pulled out the SD card and slotted it into my laptop, I found hours of footage. Not just from my property, but from others nearby, inside people's backyards, through their windows, even some weird thermal imaging from night flights. Karen had been running her own airborne surveillance program. And not just on me. I drove straight to the sheriff's office the next morning. He laughed when I told him a bald eagle had taken down a spying drone mid-flight, but he stopped laughing when I showed him the footage. His face changed fast as he scrolled through clip after clip, recognizing a few backyards and houses he knew personally. I told him about the drone's repeated presence, about the HOA's fake inspection, and how Karen admitted she was using it under the guise of community safety. The sheriff rubbed his chin and said, "I'll look into it," which meant he wasn't ready to take sides yet. But the seed was planted. Word got around, as it always does in towns like ours. By sunset, everyone from the mailman to the feed store cashier had heard about the eagle takedown. Some folks thought it was hilarious, others were furious that their privacy might have been invaded. I figured Karen would lay low for a while after the sheriff visit. But I underestimated just how far she was willing to go. The next morning, I was hauling hay when I heard the buzzing again. But this time it was louder, deeper. I looked up and nearly dropped the bale. Hovering above my cornfield was a new drone, twice the size of the last one, gleaming silver, with 8 rotors and a blinking infrared sensor that scanned back and forth like something from a sci-fi movie. She'd upgraded. Not just a new drone, but one clearly designed for longer flights, higher altitude, and more invasive surveillance. And it was flying higher, just enough to stay out of Liberty's direct reach. I realized then this wasn't just about Karen being nosy anymore. This was about power. Control. She couldn't stop me with the HOA. She couldn't win face to face. So now, she was trying to dominate from the sky. I stood there watching the new drone glide slowly across my land like it owned the place, and all I could think was, if she wanted an air war, she was going to get one. But I wouldn't fight it with noise or complaint. I had something better. I had liberty. And a plan. The new drone hovered like it had something to prove. It wasn't darting around like the first one. It glided slow and steady, methodical, almost smug, casting a faint whirring hum that irritated the back of my teeth. I stood by the fence post and stared up at it, jaw clenched. It was out of Liberty's normal range. Smart move on Karen's part. But I knew something she didn't. Liberty wasn't just a symbol of freedom for me. She was a trained hunter, sharp as a tack and more coordinated than any mechanical toy with a camera. And now I was going to show her how a real aerial operator worked. Back in the barn, I laid the pieces of the first drone on my workbench. The damage from Liberty's first takedown wasn't total. She'd actually brought it in almost perfectly intact, as if she knew I needed it for evidence. I turned the drone over and stared at the underbelly where the SD card had been. I'd already given a copy of that data to the sheriff, but I kept one for myself. There was something deeply unsettling about the way it had documented everything. Every corner of my property had been mapped, timestamps, flight paths, magnified images of windows and doors. The drone had thermal tracking capabilities, and when I looked deeper into the metadata on the files, I saw that its GPS had been logging coordinates from 5 other properties. Karen wasn't just being nosy, she was running a whole private surveillance grid. That night, I called my cousin Derek. He was a retired Air Force drone technician and the only person I trusted with what I was about to do. He drove up the next morning in his beat-up truck, climbed out with a thermos of black coffee, and looked at Liberty like she was an old comrade. "She's a beast," he said, watching her stretch her wings inside the barn. She's got better instincts.